Hello everyone. The title of this video is called NATO, a Suicide Pact, with a question mark. So why would I create a video titled NATO, a Suicide Pact? Could it be a suicide pact? Yeah, absolutely. I believe now it is. If we look at the creation of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, which occurred in 1949, and the objective of this alliance, this treaty organization, was to defend Western Europe, which at the time was West Germany, and then all other nations west and south of there: Austria, Italy, France, the Netherlands, Belgium, the United Kingdom, and Spain, Italy. Well, after post World War II, the Soviet Union was perceived as a tremendous threat to Western Europe in terms of communist expansion through a military option. And that lasted, obviously, until the disintegration of what was the Soviet Union. When the Soviet Union disintegrated, many other nations were then allowed to join the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. Remember, the Warsaw Pact consisted of Poland, Czechoslovakia, Hungary, Romania, and the Baltic nations obviously were part of the Soviet Union, as was the Ukraine. And when people would look at a map of the world at that time, prior to the 90s, you would not see the Ukraine, you would not see Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Belarus. You would not see these states. It was all one big red country known as the USSR. Now, again, the Soviet Union disintegrates and these states become independent. Some of them become democracies, some of them become tyrannical dictatorships, and still are tyrannical dictatorships. But the purpose of NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, seemed to have lost a true threat. It no longer had a threat of a Russian or a Soviet invasion of Western Europe. It just wasn't going to happen. It collapsed. The economy collapsed, and for a period of time, up until probably the early 2000s, I would say the existing NATO partners took advantage of what occurred in the Soviet Union, and that entailed taking in a lot of these states that were actually part of the Soviet Union and Warsaw Pact members into the NATO alliance, which is fine. I mean, the winner, it was a winner take all type of game, and they won, meaning NATO, the Cold War. But what's happened since? Where are we at now? What's the objective of NATO as we look at it? Well, right now it appears to be an alliance in which Germany, the United Kingdom, the key stakeholders of NATO, are basically allowed to decrease their military capacity, thus saving tremendous amounts of treasure, in hopes that the United States, under the NATO treaty, would come to their aid in any kind of conflict. And the only real conflict that could occur would be coming from the former Soviet Union. But again, Germany, the UK, France, these nations simply did not see Russia as a military threat, and if one did rise up, they could always turn to the United States. So why am I calling it a suicide pact? Well, where we sit now, NATO would always be secure as long as Germany and the United Kingdom had very strong militaries. That's not the case anymore. The German land forces component is about 60,000 men, and they can probably field about 200 tanks. The United Kingdom is the same, under 100,000 in their land component, and they're cutting back their tank forces now to just 2 battalions, which would be about 100 tanks. So combined, Germany and the United Kingdom, their entire armored, heavy armored fleet would amount to about 1 division of an existing Russian heavy armored division. So I ask the question, if something were to arise in which hypothetically the Russian Federation sees a threat to the West and responds in some way or makes an offensive move into the Baltics, or hypothetically the new Biden presidency that may occur, we know that Joe Biden and his son probably owe Ukraine something. Could that be NATO membership? Maybe. Would Russia accept Ukraine becoming a NATO member? Look at this, a NATO member. How many miles from Moscow? $280 miles, roughly, from Moscow. I don't know about that. Would the United States, if they had lost the Cold War, would the United States accept Texas joining some sort of trans-South American alliance organization? I don't think so. I don't think we would allow it. A little different, but same idea. Many Russians see Ukrainians as kind of part of the fold, and even if you look back to World War II, during the actual conflict with the Germans, Stalin was very hesitant about falling back and losing Kiev, and it was something that I think modern Russians look at with disdain. But again, back to NATO. How could this treaty organization expect to be a military alliance when they've removed their military capacity? The Polish probably have a more capable land force component than the Germans. Now, yeah, Poland is in NATO, but again, could they face off against Russia? And the answer is no, absolutely not. And I think it's just becoming a state now that is just untenable. I don't think if something were to happen, the treaty organization as it exists would maintain itself. I don't believe they would come to the rescue, meaning Germany, France, Italy, for the Baltics. If the Russians did encroach into the Baltics, is NATO going to go to total war against the Russian Federation? Well, the answer to that is no. They don't have the capability, and I don't think they have the wherewithal to do it, and especially outside the support of the United States. And if you're looking for one member to take up the slack of all the other members, which was President Trump's biggest issue, the existing member states of NATO simply were not contributing. And if something were to happen, United States boys and girls would be dying for these states who decided not to uphold their commitments. And on top of that, just not militarily, again, I don't think they would actually come to the aid. I don't think they would do it. I'm not even sure they would allow U.S. forces to land in ports and move east. I think the minute Russia crossed into Estonia, the NATO alliance would be dead. And if for some reason they did attempt to militarily engage the Russians, it would be a suicide pact because they don't have the military capacity to do it. It's just not there anymore. If Germany had a 250,000-man military and 1,000 tanks and multiple heavy divisions they could use, and an air force that was properly maintained and staffed with more than 200 fighter aircraft, then yeah, I would say absolutely NATO could be sustained and it would not be a suicide pact. But as it stands now, it serves no purpose other than to benefit the states who do not want to pay for their own military capacity. That's it. And I think what I'll talk about in a later video is Turkey. And I mean, Turkey, for all intensive purposes, is the most powerful NATO member right now, followed by probably France. That causes a chuckle to hear that France is the one of the top most powerful NATO members. Nothing against France. It's just, they've been part of NATO. They've been not part of NATO. You just don't know where the French are going to go at times. Right now, hats off to them. I think they're standing up to Turkey. I think they're standing up to the Islamic extremism that Germany is allowing into Western Europe. But that's a different video at a different time. But that's all I got. Please leave comments. Subscribe if you want, and I'll see you guys later.